Hey there, welcome back to About That. In some ways, if you've seen one downtown core of a major city, you've sort of seen them all, right? Like they all tend to have lots of concrete, these big bustling streets, and yes, the tall glass towers. But what you don't often see is that in some cases, a lot of these towers are empty. So this is a brand new tower called The Well, and it was big news a few years ago, just before it was built, that online retail giant Shopify was moving in, so occupying hundreds of thousands of square feet across multiple floors. But it was also big news just a few months ago that it was putting all of that space back up on the market, that it's not moving in, and it's been looking for a replacement. Now, the tech downturn is a big, kind of nasty piece of that puzzle, but it's not just Shopify and it's not just this building. Office vacancy has actually been a pretty big problem right across the country. So get this, of the 270 million square feet of office space across the country, 47 million is vacant. That's almost 20%. And the most recent numbers we have from late last year show us where some of the big problems are. Halifax, 18.8% of its downtown office buildings empty. Edmonton, 23%. London, Ontario, 26.2%. But that's not even the worst one. One of the emptiest cities when it comes to unused prime real estate office space is Calgary. The highest estimate I think I've seen is like a 32.6% vacancy rate downtown, which is almost a third of its space. Now, one of the big reasons for that is the price of oil, right? It crashed in a really big way, and there has been this kind of big swing away from oil sands investment, which has really done a number on its economy. And let's not forget the impact of the pandemic, right? Which just crippled a whole bunch of downtown cores across the country as you had more and more office workers working from home. But this is where sometimes you can have two negatives that make a positive, because the other perennial problem that we have in this country is a lack of housing. So what if, the thinking goes, we could turn a whole bunch of these empty office buildings into homes? Well, join me in studio and we'll explain. Okay, so let's zero in on one of these conversions happening in Calgary. And there are actually a few of them, but here's a 10-story office building downtown. So this thing was built over 40 years ago, and it used to have a few hundred SNC-Lavalin employees inside. But they've been gone for years, and the building has been empty for nearly a decade. So the goal now is to make more than 100 apartment units out of it. But first, you have to hollow it out right down to the concrete.
As you can see, we've completely demoed the whole floor, and this building will be unrecognizable at the end of this year once the full facade and all the units are built. Every single floor will have brand new exterior walls, brand new windows. Everything's going to be brand new. A, it reduces vacancy rates in our city. B, it's a lot quicker to bring units to the market. After all, the building is here, foundation is here. You're saving a lot of time going through those stages.
So pretty cool, right? But as I think you could probably already start to imagine, this project is harder than it looks. And it's not an approach that works for every building. So let's kind of figure this out. Anis Haydari is joining us right now. You were actually on site in Calgary at that building.
Yeah, I was inside the guts of the place.
Right, and so now you're here with us in Toronto. But I guess, yeah, like that must have just been like a construction site.
Yeah, the difference is that from the outside, it still looks like a regular building, right? There's a little bit of scaffolding, but then when you go inside, everything's completely gutted. You know, there's a few wires here and there, but like all the electrical's gone, most of the plumbing's gone.
But why do they have to like rip everything out and start from scratch?
So this is a building from the late 70s, and it was an office building for a long time, but it was mostly cubicle farms in there. So they need to get rid of not just the furniture, but the carpeting doesn't match what you might want for a residential apartment. The floor plans don't really match either. They're turning floors that were maybe 3 or 4 different office spaces into, 6 or 7, sometimes even 10 apartments per floor.
Right.
Basically, the only thing left was the elevators.
But even like you mentioned, the wiring and the plumbing, like everything's got to
everything's got to go, right? Think about most office spaces that we've been in, even ones that are built nowadays. You don't have as many bathrooms as you would have in a residential apartment building, right?
Sure, right.
You don't have kitchens in the same place.
Right.
So even though you might keep the big drain pipe at the bottom of the building in place, all the smaller ones throughout, they've got to go. And power outlets, it's the same thing. You need them in different places for residential apartments.
So given how much of an overhaul you have to give the building, how can it actually be cheaper to do that than to just start a fresh project or tear the whole thing down and then start anew?
Well, that's what I wanted to know. So I actually asked them that question when I was there. Is it not cheaper to just build a new building?
Depends how you look at it, right? From an environmental standpoint, you would be adding hundreds of thousands of tons of waste to your landfill. That's a huge environmental impact. When it comes to the cost itself, it still works out to be a little bit cheaper than, let's say, when you're building a brand new tower, with the city, especially with the city's support.
Oh, okay. So what does he mean there? Especially with the city support?
So the city of Calgary is putting in over a few buildings, I should say, not just this one, $100 million towards converting empty office towers into residential buildings, because we have quite a few totally empty office towers in Calgary. And so municipal politicians they've eliminated some red tape. It's easier to get approval, but they are tossing in real money to these developers so that they can make these projects happen. I should say it's not a majority of the funding, but it seems to be just enough that this can happen. There's several buildings. This is not the only one that this is happening to in Calgary.
Right, and I guess, to his point, it makes sense on a few levels because, environmentally, there's a good reason to do it, but if the bones of the building are still good, then why not do this, not just at that building, but kind of do it everywhere?
Yeah,
right?
why pour more concrete if it's already there? Right?
Yeah.
The floor's already there, the foundation's there, there's parking there. I know not every city wants you to add more parking, but in a building like this, it already existed. We put a full parking lot in for this office tower when they built it in 1978.
So is this kind of project being done on a larger scale, not just in Calgary, but in lots of different cities? Can every building sort of be a candidate for conversion?
It's not something that every building can do, but there's enough interest really across North America and not just in Calgary. In London, Ontario is looking at it. It's come up in Montreal, Boston, New York. There's an architectural firm that has actually developed this online tool for their clients because they had so much interest that they needed to be able to just plunk an address in and have it give a score out of 100.
Of whether that building can be converted?
Whether that building can be converted,
really? Okay.
Basically they get ranked. And it takes into account, environmental consequences, but also what is the building made of and how old is it, right? If a building is from the 80s or 90s, it's probably made of material that could still be repurposed. But if it's a lot older, two things come up, at least according to the architects I spoke with. It's either already been done, or maybe it's made of a type of wood or material that you just can't convert easily without having to spend so much money that you might as well raise it down and do the whole thing over again.
Very interesting. Okay, well, I hope this is something we'll hear more about from time to time. Anis Haidari, thank you so much for coming in.
You're welcome.
And we will be back after this with a final thought.